Hi, this is David McCann for WebTNG. In this video, I'm looking at website maintenance, specifically at my routines and tools. There's a perception among people who don't administer websites that a website is something that can be done. I remember working with a talented marketing team, and after a redesign, the marketing lead checked website offer task list and said, "Website's done." Those of us who've been working with websites for a while know that a site is never done. Websites are like a garden, and they need regular care. After all, the number one rule of website security is that someone needs to be paying attention, and that's usually us. I put maintenance tasks into three categories. First, there are the ongoing tasks that I perform regularly, multiple times a week. Second, there are tasks that I do periodically. Finally, there are tasks that I consider maintenance that are general site improvements. For example, we all notice things that could be improved, that really should be improved, but that aren't a priority. When I see these types of things, I note them down and then try to knock a few off the list each time I do some periodic maintenance. There are several things that I do multiple times a week, which I consider ongoing maintenance. A couple of them are automated. The first is backups. I categorize my sites in three ways. The first group has a lot of updates and content added regularly. The second group of sites aren't updated as frequently. And then I have some testing sites that I'd use just for trying out plugins and themes. The more active sites that are regularly updated, I use BlogVault, and I run that every night. I've been very happy with BlogVault. It's super reliable. When you first log in, there's kind of a dashboard screen. And if you go and pick one of your sites, then you see an overview of that site. For example, here's the WebTNG website. We can go to the WP admin, we can manage plugins or themes or users and jump right to those places. It tells the number of files and tables synced and size, how many backups it has. My plan has MalCare, firewall, and malware scanning, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then it's got some performance indicators. This is a new feature that they're implementing based on some performance testing. Also, a new feature is an activity log. You can see I've been updating the article that accompanies the video. You can restore, of course, go look at details, or migrate to different hosting, and then you can add staging. Depending on your plan, probably there's a limit to the number of staging sites you have, but this is kind of useful if you don't have your own staging options and need to try something out real quickly. When you go to restore, you can actually go in and choose individual files or folders and tables. So that's kind of a cool option. Anyway, I've been very happy with BlogVault. One thing that I do is I stagger the backup time so all the servers that are on the same hosting aren't being backed up concurrently. For the smaller group of sites, the ones that don't change very often, where I'm not adding a lot of content, I usually back these up when I make a change or when I do periodic maintenance. And the testing sites, I don't usually back those up. For ad hoc backups, I use all-in-one WP migration or WPVivid. Another automated task is malware scanning, and MalCare is a sister project of BlogVault. My license allows me to use both together, so for sites where I'm using BlogVault, I also use MalCare. One cool thing of MalCare is that the way it works is when you do a backup, it backs up to their platform, and then MalCare is a scan of the backup files on their platform. So the malware scan doesn't use any more of your server resources. So that's a nice feature. My sites that don't change very often, I use VirusDie. I think they've just added a WordPress plugin, but you can use the Pro version anyway without a plugin. And so it sits outside of your WordPress admin on the file system. And this could have some performance impacts. So, I stagger the schedule of the site so they're not all being scanned at the same time. Whereas backups are really, really essential, Strictly speaking, probably a malware scan isn't absolutely required, but I think it's a nice have if you can do it. Because if your sites ever do get hit by malware or a hacker, the sooner you find out there's a problem, the easier it'll be to clean it up, and the less disruption there'll be. The other maintenance task, the one that's really important, is updating WordPress plugins and themes. A couple of years ago, the question was asked in the WP Builds Facebook group, how often do you run backups? And the answers range from once a month to once a week to once a day. These days, I can't imagine running backups less than once a week. There are so many updates, and security issues get a lot of attention. I run them every other day. And I use MainWP. It's a huge time saver. It has premium extensions, but there are a whole lot of free features, and updates is one of the free features. And what you do is you connect your site. You have a dashboard plugin, which is what we're looking at here. And then there's a child plugin, and you install that on your sites. When you want to do updates, you run a sync, and so that will run for a while. And when it's done, you have a couple of categories here. You have WordPress updates, which, there hasn't been a recent release. Plugins, which is what we're looking at here, and then theme updates. So you can just click here to update them all. You can update individual ones. You can click here to go and look and see what sites it's on. You can click here, and if there's a README thing, it'll show that in a pop-up. So this is real easy to do, and it's a real time saver. I'm a real MainWP fan. Periodic maintenance is something I try to do every 3 or 4 months. The first group of tasks is on the hosting level. I have a VPS on UpCloud and use the RunCloud VPS management panel, which I like quite a bit. If you go in to look at one of your web applications, one of your sites, there's an option to look at the logs. It's not uncommon to see errors, but what I kind of try to watch for are the ones that appear over and over again. That can often indicate some kind of misconfiguration or a bug in a plugin. So that's the first web server level thing that I look at. The second web server thing that I look at is I use FileZilla, and I go and look at the file system for the website. Here I'm looking at the WP content directory. And just as an example, I'm using Toolset on this site, but if I had switched away to, say, use ACF or MetaBox, this folder would get left behind. And so that's the kind of thing that I go in and check out to make sure there's not a lot of trash left around. The uploads directory is another good place to look. Themes and plugins often leave some configuration files there. And finally, another thing to look at when you're looking at the file system level is just to kind of keep your eyes open if there's some odd file or directory. That could be an indication of being hacked. It's good to keep your eyes open just in case you see something unusual. So those are the file system level items. Next, I run some checks in MainWP. There's a user section here where you can get a report. And so I click to select all the sites, and I add all the roles, and then run a report to show all users. Here, for example, there's a user that I created for someone when there was an issue with a theme. And I've already downgraded them to subscriber. They had a chance to look, but I wasn't sure if they were going to want me to confirm that their fix works. So I left the user in, just downgraded it to subscriber. But here, for example, is a user that I can delete, that I can remove. The second thing I look at in MainWP, the next report is plugin report, and I choose all sites. You can run the report by active or inactive or both. And then when I show the plugins, here, for example, you see I've got 2 versions of 301 Redirects Pro, just kind of as an example. And that's kind of an indication that one of them isn't getting updated as it should be. I've had that happen sometimes with Toolset also. So that's the kind of thing you can look at. The other thing this is useful for is sometimes I try to standardize on a plugin. For example, I decided for SMTP connectivity, I was going to use Fluent SMTP. And I started switching my sites over, and maybe there was a site I forgot to update so that they were all using the same plugin. And that's the kind of thing you would also see in this report. So the next group of tasks are things that I actually do on each site. I go to each site, I test the contact form, the email sign up, just to make sure they're working, especially on sites that don't get a lot of activity. And I also periodically, maybe not every time, take a look at the About Us page and the Privacy Policy page, just to make sure that those are up to date, because sometimes we list we're using Google Analytics or we're using MailChimp or whatever, and those things might change. So just to make sure that things are up to date. Then in the admin, I check for 404s because that can be an indication of broken links. And a couple of sites I'm using 301 Redirects Pro, and on other sites I use the redirect feature of an SEO plugin. Unfortunately, when I went to look at 301 redirects here for the first time, the first thing I saw is this notice that it had deactivated itself because it had some problem connecting to verify the license. It looked like it was still working, which is good, but because we rely on plugins, ones that kind of deactivate themselves, that doesn't thrill me that much. So I kind of lose a little confidence. So I did reach out to the development team just to let them know that there was that issue. And that's one of the reasons why I usually try to do maintenance in time periods when I've got a block of time where I can devote to it. Because if you look, you always find problems, and it can take a while to get them resolved or to report issues. But once I clicked and activated my license, then you see a nice dashboard here. And one of the things I really like about the WP301 redirects is that it's kind of intelligent and will detect when a pretty permalink gets truncated, like in this example, and it'll automatically create a redirect for that and send them to the right place. So that's one of the features I like about this plugin. And then one of the other things I like to do is I like to do some database optimizations. This is a development version of a website, so I apologize, not everything is up to date, and that's just because I don't have the licenses in for all the plugins on the development site. So that's why it shows there. I do keep things up to date. And there are a couple of options for doing database optimization. WP Optimize is from the same people that make Updraft Plus. They have a freemium plugin. You can optimize your database tables, you can clean out post revisions, auto drafts, and so on. And so that's nice to get that stuff out of the way. And then another thing I like about the free version of this program is their table view. It shows you the tables, and it also shows you, though, the plugins that it knows of that use those tables. It's not uncommon if you had Yoast and then you switch to a different SEO plugin, the Yoast tables, for example, might be left behind. So it's nice to have some indication of what plugins maybe use those tables. Caveat, when you're doing this kind of optimization, you really have to have a backup. So when I come in and do this on-site maintenance, first thing I do is I take a manual backup. Usually I use all-in-one WP migration. I've been using it for a long time. But on some sites I use WPVivid. That's a newer option for me. And then another plugin for database optimization is Advanced Database Cleaner Pro. And this is popular in my circle of friends. It's been around a long time and it's reliable and stable. And it also has a lifetime license, so I'm sure that adds to its popularity. Just like with the other one, you can optimize, kind of remove revisions and drafts and transients and things like that. This one, you have a table view. One of the things that I like is if your database has any tables with corrupt data, it'll show that here, and you can go in and repair the table. So that's a nice feature there. You can check them and then do a bulk action for optimize or repair, or can truncate the table if you wanted to. And Advanced Database Cleaner Pro also lets you take a look at the cron jobs. That's something I like to look at. I use this, or there's a cron plugin, a free one in the WordPress plugin directory. And just to see, again, sometimes if you install a plugin and then uninstall it, it'll leave a cron job there. Or if there are some jobs that are failing, sometimes that's an indication of a problem that you want to look into. So database optimization is another thing that I like to take a look at. Then the last category of maintenance tasks I do periodically are these general site improvements, those things that I've noticed that it'd be good to fix this or address this issue. This round, there are a couple of things that I did. One, I have a site where I created my own SEO schema plugin, and I noticed that that wasn't working anymore. I had changed themes and some other things on the site, so that wasn't working. And I had been using SEO Press on this site. Rather than update my custom programming, I decided I would kind of take a different tact. And on this site, it's fairly straightforward. SEO Press Pro was overkill. It was a lot more complex than I needed. Slim SEO recently added a migration from SEO Press to Slim SEO, which worked fantastic. What I did is I migrated my data over to Slim SEO, and then I used Schema Pro to create the review schema. This is a book review site. If you saw the video that I did on the schema options, then you'll get my reasoning for the switch. It'll kind of make sense. Anyway, I created my review schema for the books using Schema Pro, but there was one custom field that the schema definition needed that I didn't have, and that was it wanted a short description of the book. And so what I did is I had recently purchased WP Sheet Editor, and I thought this would be a great place to give it a try. This is like your slimmed down Excel type of view of your data. And you can go in and edit individual rows and things like that. But I had a lot of records, and I didn't want to go down and edit each row individually. But what I did instead is this is what I needed, the book description field. And what I did instead is I took the title and author, I took the genre and the audience, and I concatenated them using the bulk edit option. And this is the interface that you have for your bulk edit. You select your rows, you say which field you want to modify, and you choose your function type. Think Excel functions, but a subset of Excel functions. And then I created a macro to place the current value of this field with the post title is a genre for audience, and I ran that. So again, another power user type thing where you got to have a backup before you start something like that. But I was pleased because this is a fast way to update a lot of rows in the database. So I was happy that the way that worked out. One thing that I noticed when you are looking at your website tables and columns and fields in WP Sheet Editor, they also show you these meta keys. And these are fields that are maybe saved with your records for different themes and plugins for this post. And you can see that like these are ones for Ultimate Add-ons for Gutenberg. And I am actually using that on this site. So I'm not going to delete those. But what I noticed was there were a ton of these meta key fields there from SEO Press. So while I was doing the maintenance, I actually went into the database and ran some queries to delete those. I kind of Googled online, found the query and tweaked it and deleted those meta keys. Again, another thing where you have to have a backup before you start. There's kind of a rule of thumb that a friend of mine told me one time, which is when you go in to fix one thing, you're going to find 2 or 3 more that need attention. So this was an example of that. Then the last thing that I did is I redid the logos on a couple of my sites. These logos, I had created them. I'm not a graphic artist, and I'm challenged on that level. And I usually use the online image editing app called Stencil. It's about my speed. Kind of simple. You can't save in SVG format. And as a result, I had PNG logos. And Moore Cohen, who's a designer friend on Facebook, told me a few years ago to get serious and use SVG logos. I didn't really want to get into Affinity Photo or Photoshop or one of the vector editing programs for this. But I noticed that there was one of these online graphic editing programs on AppSumo called Glorify. And one of its features is that you can export as SVG. So I redid this logo, which was looking kind of blurry. In theory, your image optimization programs like ShortPixel, or I'm using EWWW, aren't supposed to optimize an image more than once. But it just seemed like over time it was getting worse and worse. So I was happy that that's sharp and clear. I did the same on the Elementor 360 website, used the same program. Kind of my level of logo creation. But that was another maintenance task, kind of general site improvement maintenance task that I undertook in this cycle. So we've run through my list of maintenance tasks. Now for a little discussion and some conclusions. My list works for me. If you only have 1 or 2 websites, then you or your designate will want to be logging in at least once a week. These days, plugins, themes are updated fairly often, and security issues seem to get a lot of attention, so I wouldn't go longer than a week. I'd do it every other day. If you have multiple sites and you aren't using a multi-site management tool, then start using MainWP immediately. It's free and it's a real time saver. It's probably wise for you to adapt this list or any maintenance list you find to match the type of sites that you're running. For example, if you have an e-commerce site, WooCommerce, you'll want to check that orders are coming in as expected. The important thing isn't to run my list or anybody else's. The really important thing is to be paying attention. So that's my overview of my maintenance list and the tools I use. There's a text version of the video available on the WebTNG website, along with other walkthroughs, reviews, and resources. Feel free to leave a comment if you found something interesting that you thought is going to be helpful, or if you have a question. Thank you for watching.